Good evening, everyone. My name is Nikita Sachdev, and I'm your host for CNBC Arabia's On the Chain, where we talk all about Web3 and blockchain. This show is in partnership with WeMade, the leading game developer from South Korea. Today, we welcome a very special guest, Managing Director for Ripple for Middle East, North Africa, and Southeast Asia, Mr. Naveen Gupta. Mr. Gupta, it's a pleasure to have you on our show today.
Nikita, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start off with a quick intro about yourself and what you do in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm with Ripple. I run the Middle East and North Africa business, like you rightly said. I've been with Ripple for 5 years, and before that, I had my own entrepreneurial startup. And before that, for 15 years, I was working with HSBC and Citigroup. So always in the payment space, always interested in doing something new.
Thank you for that. So, Mr. Gupta, earlier this year, the ruler of Dubai issued a law which sets a regulation of virtual assets known as DVAL. What are your thoughts about crypto in Dubai and in the region?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, crypto is a global phenomenon. So what you're seeing across the board is usage of crypto rising across the world. So just let's look at two big headlines. So one, MasterCard announced that now crypto prepaid card will be accepted in 90 million merchant locations around the world. Now that's a big step. Of course, it's starting with one country, but it'll keep expanding. Second, Meta, earlier known as Facebook, announced that now people will be able to use their NFTs as profile pictures across their platform, and they have about 2 billion users, right? And UAE or Middle East is not any different from what's happening in terms of the global phenomena. So if you look at ADGM, which issued cryptocurrency regulations way back in 2018, and the ecosystem has been growing. VARA, if you look at Bahrain, which has issued cryptocurrency regulations. And then, of course, you have Oman, which is now looking at the same thing. So if you look at money centers around the world, there are 4 big money centers. So there is New York, there is London, there is Dubai, and there is Singapore. And all these money centers compete with each other and also collaborate with each other to essentially enable transactions. And I think in crypto, both Dubai and Singapore have the lead, and they are moving ahead through enabling regulations.
That's very progressive of MasterCard for sure. But what's happening in the region? When can we expect to see MasterCard Middle East, for example, start accepting crypto payments, start taking crypto payments?
Yeah. So again, in my mind, it should not be too far away because it's a global phenomena, it'll happen. But I can say from the context of Ripple, for example, in terms of what we're doing. So we are, as you know, into remittances. And remittances is a big play here in the Middle East. If you look at just the UAE itself, 90% of the people who live here are foreigners, and they send money back home. And today, if you look at remittances, it's thoroughly broken. So just to give you one example, and this is UN statistics, it cost about 7% to send money, $200 from country A to country B. That means $14 out of the $200 get taken away because somebody is sending money from point A to point B.
For sure. The Middle East is definitely one of the leading areas for remittances. And I know that in 2020, there's a statistic that shows that $78 billion was done through remittances in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. How important of a part does crypto play when it comes to remittances?
Absolutely. So let me explain to you how it works, right? So, and how we are changing it. So let's assume Nikita wanted to send $100 to somebody in the US from here in the UAE. You know what is the fastest way to do this? Fastest way would be for you to keep that $100 in your pocket, get on a plane, and then deliver it personally to the person in New York or in Miami or in San Francisco. Otherwise, it'll take maybe 3 days if ever your money reaches there, right? There will be a lot of errors. If you were to call your institution from where you have wired the money, they'll say it is in progress, and for 3 days you would not know where the money is, right? Now, let's take an example. If that institution, let's call it a bank A, was using Ripple as a platform, there are 2 things that we would do very directly. First, between bank A and bank B, we will establish like a WhatsApp kind of connection. So even before a debit happens to your account, information will go to bank B, which is the bank in the US, to essentially say, Nikita wants to send money to, say, John. Here are her details. Here are the details of John. Can you screen this transaction? Can you tell us what will be the exchange rate that will be applied to this transaction, and when will you be able to deliver the money? Within seconds, Bank B responds back and says, hey, you know what, this transaction is good to go. I've done the screening. This is the exchange rate. This is the amount that will get delivered if you were to go ahead with that transaction. Now it's all complete. The transaction is ready to go. here comes enter, and within 120 seconds, the transaction reaches on the other side and it gets settled. And this settlement layer, that means when the money moves, so the earlier one that I described was messaging, the two banks interacting with each other, the settlement layer happens through XRP. That means XRP gets sold, which is available on 24/7 markets around the world at a crypto exchange, and the local currency gets bought and then gets paid out. And whichever country has an instant payment system, so for example, look at India, look at Philippines, look at number of other markets in the world, within 2 minutes, the money will be in beneficiary's account, in this case, John, and everybody goes home, versus the 3 days it takes today to move the money from point A to point B.
So that makes sense. I mean, apart from jumping on an airplane and sending over the money physically, cryptocurrency is definitely the fastest way to transact. However, it's still not mass adopted yet. So how long before everybody starts using crypto? How long before my mom starts understanding what cryptocurrency is and go to the bank and can trust that the cryptocurrency is secure and actually there?
Actually, your mom doesn't need to understand the complexity of the crypto. We need to hide it from them. So for example, let's take an example of internet. When you use email, you are not worried about is it a HTTPS connection or how the inner rails of internet are working, right? But somebody smart, an entrepreneur, in this case, a Google or somebody else, creates that application layer on the top, which your mom can essentially use. And the same thing number of entrepreneurs are doing. For example, number of institutions that work with us are doing exactly that, right? So they are giving the front end to anybody who would wants to use it, but at the back end, which is the plumbing rail, is RippleNet, which essentially then enables that money to move seamlessly and at a much lower cost. Because crypto markets are 24/7, and you are able to use XRP as a bridge to be able to move value from point A to point B. So we have to remove complexity from the user, because one thing I think is hindering crypto adoption is that the user interface is not neat and clean. It requires too much complication for somebody to understand the wallet address, and these are complicated things for people to understand.
That's a really good way to put it, actually. Come to think about it, I have no idea how my credit card works, but I still use it on a daily basis. So that does make sense. Apart from mass adoption being one of the important factors and easy UI, UX, another thing is regulation. So how long before the governments start accepting crypto and start adopting it? And how is the UAE in terms, where does the UAE stand in that race of regulation?
Absolutely. So first of all, healthy regulations are absolutely essential for markets to develop, right? And these are required to develop because you don't want to stifle innovation and entrepreneurship. Here's somebody with a unique idea who wants to use cryptos for a use case, and if that use case is legal and if that use case makes sense and brings benefit to the consumer, then the enabling regulation can essentially help that innovation to develop, right? And then the second thing is you want to keep all the fraudsters out. You want to make sure that there is investor protection, there is consumer protection, and other things that are important for a consumer to interact in a healthy manner are essentially available. So we personally believe UAE is a great ground, and as you know, as both with VARA and with ADGM, and if you look at other markets in the Middle East as well, and at some point we expect Saudi, for example, KSA, to issue enabling regulations as well, then this region will again move forward, and at least for digital assets and crypto, we think it'll be leading regulator or leading jurisdiction along with Singapore. So there'll be two large money centers for crypto. One would be UAE and one potentially would be Singapore.
That's a good way to put it. We've seen Ripple and XRP partner with huge corporations, and I feel like that is the route towards mass adoption, is partnering with traditional institutions. But how are these traditional institutions like banks actually thinking about digital assets? How are they incorporating digital assets, and how are they incorporating blockchain technology?
Yeah. So think it from the institution's point of view. Any institution that is customer-centric have to adopt new technologies because they want to be responsive towards customers' need, right? So let's take in one example, DBS, it's in public domain, essentially is able to sell Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP to its customers. And the reason they're doing that is what they found, and this is quoted by Piyush Gupta, the CEO of DBS, $1 billion from customer accounts essentially moved to different cryptocurrency exchanges. So I assume DBS thought, hey, instead of customers migrating their balances from bank accounts to these cryptocurrency exchanges, Why can't they essentially buy digital assets or cryptocurrencies from us itself in a very protected and in a legal environment, because all the customers are fully KYC'd. So a lot of other institutions are looking at that as well, but as you know, larger institutions tend to be slow, and that's the reason companies like Ripple, we partner with these institutions to say, we will take the tech burden away from you. We are great at tech, we understand the blockchain space, we understand how XRP Ledger works, and we will be able to bring these innovations with you in terms of partnership. But I think the second thing that I would say is that enabling regulation, which you essentially mentioned earlier, also need to be in place, because what the financial institutions don't want to be in a place where the central bank or the regulator becomes upset for them doing something that they're not supposed to do. So let's assume partners like Ripple and the financial institution is there and the enabling regulation is there, then they would love to do business because they would not want their business to essentially be taken away by somebody else.
What about if these financial institutions adopt blockchain? What kind of setbacks are they facing?
Yeah, so let's look at today, right? So in some way you can today think of there is forest fire in cryptos, right? And I personally am a fan of forest fires because they essentially enable the ground to get clear and for the weeds to essentially get burnt so that the strong trees can survive. So let's take an example of 2001, right? In 2001, pets.com, essentially they did not have a viable business model, they got wiped out. If you look at, for example, Enron, if you look at WorldCom, a lot of frauds came out. And exactly the same thing is happening in the crypto world as well. As the interest rates are rising, the cost of capital is rising, anybody who was doing the leverage trades essentially are getting wiped out, and it could be due to fraud or it could be due to a bad business model. So from my point of view, what we essentially see, institutions which we are building business models for long term, enabled through technology, are then able to move forward. And like Facebook, like Google, they would be the new Web3 companies whom we would look back after 5 years and say, wow, wasn't that great?
Right, that's a good way to put it. So setbacks are important, I guess, to learn and build, but it's just important to grow from there on.
Yeah, and then for the fraudulent and the weak to get wiped out, it's important for them to essentially go away and leave the system so that the better ones can succeed.
I like that you put it as forest fires. I guess crypto winter is a bit like forest fires. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Naveen Gupta. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Likewise, it's great to be here, Nikita. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I think we all learned some valuable information about the Web3 space today. I'm looking forward to sharing more exclusive insight next week. Once again, special thanks to our sponsor, WeMade, and a special thanks to all of you for watching CNBC Arabia's On the Chain.
هذا البرنامج برعاية ويميكس.